Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It's another quiet week from an Arsenal perspective. All the Arsenal stories more or less revolve around our players who are or have been at the World Cup. A few of them have gone home this week, so we'll talk about them. We'll talk about some of the players that are still involved, of course, and we'll talk a bit about the tournament as a whole and some of the games, some of the incidents, some of the bits and bobs that have been going on this week. Beyond that, though, folks, it is very, very quiet when it comes to Arsenal transfers. There are a few bits and bobs, of course, that are rumbling away in the background. You would have heard on Monday, myself and James have quite a long conversation about the interest in Bruno Guimaraes, a player who I do think would be a good addition to our midfield, particularly when concerns continue about what we're asking or what is being asked, I think, by Arsenal and England, but England right now of Declan Rice. You might have seen the image of him sitting on the bench towards the end of England's win over the Democratic Republic of Congo with an ice pack on his hamstring. That is never a good sign. And I think if we're being honest, he looks like somebody who is being nursed very heavily through this tournament after what was a long and arduous season with Arsenal. So that probably does go some way to explaining the interest in Bruno Guimaraes. Newcastle, of course, have lost Sandro Tonali. It seems he's gone to Tottenham for a fee of beyond £90 million, which is fucking insane. And Matheus Fernandes going to Tottenham from West Ham for £82-85 million. This market is absolutely crazy if you're buying from within the Premier League. So we'll talk a bit about that and talk a bit about where Arsenal might need to explore other options. And as I said, we'll touch on some of the stuff that's been going on at the World Cup. So let's just get on with it. And I am delighted to welcome back to the show someone we haven't spoken to in quite a while. So it's overdue. From The Athletic, it's Art de Roche. Good afternoon, Art.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I want to begin today with, I feel like this is going to become a weekly feature, the how worried are you about Declan Rice conversation? Because, I was probably at 9.999 out of 10 going into yesterday's England game, their win over the Democratic Republic of Congo. And afterwards, I don't know, I've gone full Spinal Tap. It's 11 out of 10 now. It's hard not to be concerned, isn't it, when you see him sitting there, ice pack on the hamstring. Yeah. He's playing in midfield, then he's asked to go and play at right back. Just as Arsenal did throughout the campaign, England are asking a lot of Declan Rice.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of my kind of scale of being worried, maybe I'd go with a 7 or 8, but I'm usually quite calm and relaxed anyway when it comes to a lot of things, really. So my 7 is probably a lot of other people's 10.
Sure. Okay.
And I do get why, as you say, the pictures of him after the game with the ice on his hamstring really don't give you any, good feelings. And also, one thing that's been in the back of my mind is, so I did a piece just before the World Cup about, it was more centered on Bukayo Saka and his availability, but I had to include Rice in there as well because I think they're quite similar in terms of the minutes they're asked to play, and over the course of their careers, as you mentioned, Andrew, the different roles they have to do on a pitch across the 90 minutes, but also across their whole careers. And with Rice, I remember Mikel Arteta did speak after the Euros, so Euro 2024, he said, and I'm just paraphrasing at the minute, but he said Bukayo and Declan had played around 130 games in 2 seasons for club and country. And I looked it over, and with Rice, he was spot on. It was 130 games. And with Saka, it was 121 games. So for me, it's more about looking at the accumulation over seasons and then thinking about, okay, well, what is the start of next season going to look like for a lot of Arsenal players, but those two in particular?
Saka, has been maybe easier to manage, if that's the right way of putting it, right? Because there is this direct replacement in the shape of Noni Madueke, who, I think has been a bit hit and miss for England during the tournament, but there's enough confidence there that Thomas Tuchel can say, I'll start Madueke in most of the games. I think Madueke started 3 of the 4 games. Saka came off the bench yesterday, obviously, for England. Rice was left out of the game against Panama, is that right?
Yep.
But his role and his influence and his importance is such that I think it's more difficult for Tuchel to sort of say, right, well, you know what, today this is a knockout game, I'll play Kobe Mainu instead, or Jordan Henderson. I mean, listen, any of us sitting here, if we were choosing our team and picking a team to play a World Cup qualifying game, with all due respect, it's not going to be Jordan Henderson over Declan Rice, even if you have some worries about how much you're asking of him. But Saka, obviously, a little bit different. There's more to come, obviously, from an England perspective. There's more to come in a very challenging environment, too, when England go to Mexico City, play at the Azteca, 7,000 feet above sea level. The altitude is going to be an issue, I think. And Declan is one of those guys. I think it could be, whatever little bit of Irish heritage he has in him. He gets that kind of red face and a bit flustered looking when he's running around in the heat. We don't cope with that as well as some. But it's going to be interesting to see how much he can do. He talked about this neural pain that he has in his back and his hamstring. He went off and missed the Panama game because he had a little bit of a calf strain. Then he's holding an ice pack to his hamstring. I made the analogy today in the blog that it's sort of like a cracked windshield, and it starts off small, but the longer you ignore it or the longer you try and drive with it, the crack just sort of keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Despite being 7 out of 10 on the worried scale, do you have concerns that it might go a bit too far if England continue in the tournament, or there comes a point where physically he just can't do it anymore? And then obviously we have to think about what happens at the start of next season, and we've been linked with Bruno Guimaraes, and that makes a lot of sense in many ways. But he too is at this tournament, having played a long season for Newcastle and for Brazil. So there's a lot to sort of consider on an individual basis about the player himself, and then what Arsenal are going to do to try and cope with all of this.
Yeah, in terms of Rice, what is probably the most concerning thing is it feels like he's more important for this England side than he is with Arsenal, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is not that he's a better player for England, but that they just rely on him a lot more in terms of, I felt like when I was watching, let's say the Ghana game, for instance, actually also the Croatia game, the camera was almost always just zoomed in close up on Declan Rice running towards his own goal to make a recovery run and win the ball back, which obviously he does a lot at Arsenal, but it felt like he was doing it a lot more than usual for England. And obviously that comes from the team not being as, well connected. They don't play together every week and such things.
And they don't have that sort of brilliant central defensive partnership that we have, which is a kind of a bit of a safety net for someone like Rice when he's playing for Arsenal. Exactly.
So it felt like he was doing a lot more hard work than he would usually be doing at Arsenal. And when you consider Mexico, as you said, there is the issue of the altitude, but also I think the atmosphere in that game is going to take the intensity to a different level as well. They've won all their games. They haven't conceded a goal yet at this tournament, and I think they'll be really up for it. So in terms of Rice, it's really difficult because, as you say, you can't really, drop him out of the team or rest him at this point in the tournament. So I guess maybe it comes down to just almost, sorry for making a Tottenham reference on this pod, but everyone talking about Ledley King back in the day, saying he never used to train during the week. It was all recovery until game day. Maybe that has to be the way to go with him during this tournament, because he's essential to this England team, and you can't imagine what they would do without him. Even when you look at the DR Congo game, obviously Harry Kane took the headlines, but if you look at that first goal, it comes from that Arsenal triangle of Rice, Saka and Eze pushing up that right-hand side. So you see the value going forward as well as, going back.
Well, yeah, his workload isn't going to end anytime soon. I mean, you mentioned Tottenham, and I don't like to talk about them, and you don't like to talk about them, but I understand why, particularly this week, people might be talking about them. And to sort of pivot just a little bit before we come back to some other World Cup stuff, they're making headlines this week because they're signing two midfielders. Sandro Tonali from Newcastle, Matheus Fernandes from West Ham. Tonali in particular, I think, is mind-blowing, eye-catching, however you want to classify it, because I think he's a good player, but we're now at a point where a good player is costing £92 million and potentially £100 million, but I don't think there's much chance of Tottenham paying the add-ons for success. So they can keep it below that £100 million mark. But Matheus Fernandes, £85 million, whatever it is. We've seen Elliot Anderson go for £116 million. Have you any sort of theories? I mean, Tottenham, they're just throwing money around because they have to, because they finished 17th 2 years in a row, I think, and they really do need to sort their shit out. So they're willing and prepared to throw money around. Anderson, £116 million means nothing to Manchester City, as we know, but this is a hugely, hugely inflated market. I mean, I think they're all decent players, but we're looking at the price of a decent player, not like a sure thing in the same way that Rice was when he came to Arsenal. We're looking at those prices going up and up and up and up and up now. And that's something Arsenal will have to contend with if they're going to go for Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle. It won't be quite the same because he is older. He's 28 years of age, and that plays a part in what Newcastle can realistically ask for him versus Tonali, who's 26, and Matheus Fernandes, who's 21, 22, I think. So there are other elements of that, but it is a really interesting market in which to operate, particularly if you're buying from within the Premier League. You've got to be prepared to really dish out the cash.
Yeah, so actually, so for people who are listening, I was a little bit late to jump on today because I was writing something, and it was actually to do with this conversation. Okay. Although the subject of the piece was Bradley Barcola. Okay. Because as David Ornstein wrote at the start of the week, PSG feel that he's worth way more than the 116 million that Manchester City paid for Elliot Anderson. And it was kind of a look at, what is Bradley Barcola worth? And I had some help from a colleague, Chris Witherspoon, who is more into the finances and stuff. And I feel like we're getting to a point where almost every summer there is a deal that kind of sets a precedent for what follows. But you look at the top five, let's say, most expensive wingers in Premier League history. Jack Grealish is number one, 100 million for Manchester City. And then number two is Anthony, 82 million. And I think you see, like, sometimes as fans, as, I don't like to use the word, but as consumers of the sport, we can all get quite hung up on fees and prices for players, but they're always going to rise. And it's not something that I feel great about, but I understand that there are going to be teams who will pay it. For instance, you look at Liverpool last summer, they paid over 100 million for two players. I think we're now in a situation where it is going to become a norm where, I guess, let's say 20 years ago, a good player would cost you maybe £15 million. And let's say 10 years ago, a good player would maybe cost you up to between 30 and 45 million pounds.
I mean, maybe the interest in Christos Solis tells us a little bit of something about how the market is going, where we're looking at a 24-year-old Greek international who played for Norwich and didn't really make the grade there, but has gone to Belgium. And, I think, with all due respect to any Belgian listeners, the Belgian Pro League is not as competitive, let's say, as the Premier League, and it's not as difficult as the Premier League. And much like the Eredivisie, you used to see players who bang in all these goals, the Matthias Kesmans of the world who bang in all the goals in the Eredivisie and come to England and just find it really, really difficult to do that. But, which isn't to say that's going to be Solis is going to have going to be an average player. He might be, might not be though. But you're still looking at 35, 40 million pounds for that player coming from that league with that sort of career trajectory. But it's interesting you mention Barcola, because this was something I did want to talk to you about when it comes to Arsenal's transfer business this summer. Does it feel to you, because it does to me, that Arsenal kind of need like a big name signing? And I don't mean just for the sake of it, right?
Yeah.
We won the league after 22 years. We've been building this project for 3, 4, 5, 6 years now. And it's come to fruition. And we got to the Champions League final, and we're a penalty shootout away from winning the Champions League. And this is a moment that we've spoken about where maybe Arsenal can really consolidate for the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, which doesn't mean we're going to win it every year, but we're in a position now where we have a really great chance of winning the league next year, the year after. It's going to be competitive. We all know that, but we're really strong now. And I feel like in seasons past, when Arsenal have won the league, one of the reasons why we have not been able to retain the title is that we didn't necessarily go as hard as we could have in the transfer market. I went back to look at what we did in the transfer market of 2004, summer of 2004, and the players we brought in were Manuel Almunia, a 20-year-old Robin van Persie, and Emmanuel Eboué. And I think maybe Mathieu Flamini came in that year as well on a free transfer from Marseille. Now, I get it, it's different times, and we had a much better squad. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, listen, it was a very, very good squad back then, but we didn't really add that sort of super player to the mix that people would have liked to see. And I feel like this time around, using the pull that we have, if that makes sense, it would feel a little bit disappointing if we weren't able to bring in a player of that kind. Do you know what I mean? It might be Barcola, yeah. It might be somebody else, but the sort of like the same way that Declan Rice got people like, ooh, yeah, this is going to really make a difference to our team. I recognize you've got to make some squad signings. They can't all be 100 million pound signings. Someone like Solis, if he comes in, could be a really good squad player, but he's not going to get bums in seats, if that's the right way of putting it. So I'm curious as to how you view that aspect of this summer's transfer business.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it's actually interesting. We did a little mailbag a couple of weeks ago just to get some reader questions in. And one was about kind of how do Arsenal go about their transfer business to try and retain the Premier League. So I have started to look into that a little bit to write about it maybe next week, I think. And as part of that, I'm trying to look at how not just Arsenal have behaved when they've, won the league, similar to what you said in 2004. It obviously wasn't a mind-blowing summer window, but how teams who have retained the Premier League have behaved. And you look at Chelsea in 2005, they acted differently. They made big signings, some signings that people didn't feel like they needed to. Like I think Sean Wright-Phillips was the one that got the most kind of heat, especially from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah.
But I also feel like you have to you have to have balance with it. We've all seen what happened with Liverpool last year, where they probably went too gung ho. So I think it needs to be a bit of a marriage between tweaking what you feel you need to improve, which I feel Arsenal should be in a position where they feel that way because they lost the Champions League final. It's not like they won the Premier League and were nowhere near winning the Champions League final. They actually have the Champions League as a target for them that is attainable, which I think should keep them honest in relation to what you're talking about in the transfer market. And I'm in complete agreement that I feel like there does need to be a kind of a heavy hitting signing, whether it's one or two, and then a few other squad players. And also, I just wanted to say as well, in terms of fees, the way everything's going, it just makes me feel like Christian Mosquera for 13 million was just an outstanding piece of business.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember the last time I'd seen, a player of that quality cost so little money.
Yeah.
But hopefully Arsenal have a few of those as well this summer.
Yeah, I was gonna just comment on that, because it is the kind of business that when you are looking at what's going on in the Premier League, and we know how much Mikel Arteta values Premier League experience, right? And many of his signings have been from the Premier League. If you can snaffle a bargain or two from European clubs, I don't mean smaller European clubs, but European clubs who do not have the kind of financial firepower that Arsenal have, if you've identified talent. And I think in Mosquera's case, didn't he have just like a year left on his contract, something like that? And Valencia had offered a deal, and he became aware of our interest, where it sort of lines up for you to be able to, I don't know if extract the maximum value from a deal is the right way to put it, but it feels like that. So we'll see what Andrea Berta has got lined up. Would Barcola be a signing that would tick that sort of important statement box for you?
I think so. I do really like him. I know some people are quite critical of his finishing, but looking at the numbers across the season, he actually scores as many goals as he should when you look at the XG. So last season, he scored 11 goals in the league from 10.9 XG. And the season before, he scored 14 goals from 13.6 XG. So you're looking at someone who does maybe miss chances you'd expect him to score, but then sometimes he'll make up for it with quite special strikes as well. So I also feel like when you look at his skill set and what he does outside of just scoring, the way he plays in terms of getting in behind, always looking to take his man on as well. I think that's something that Arsenal would really benefit from. I know some people wonder whether it could be done in the Premier League when teams are just sitting in low blocks, but I do feel like there are moments where Arsenal haven't been up against a low block and they could have dealt with the situation better on counter-attacks, for instance, fast breaks, where I've been sat at the Emirates and just felt like the team's almost jogged up the pitch rather than absolutely going for it.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I've been thinking about this summer, is like, what do we add to this team that we don't already have or don't have enough of? And I really do feel like pace is one of those things where, defenders are fast now, and we have a little bit of pace, let's say, in the shape of Gabriel Martinelli. I don't think we've got any like absolute slow coaches or anything like that, but you don't play all your games in the Premier League as well. You can play in Europe and you can open up those guys behind you. And I think certainly in that aspect of things, he brings qualities to the team that we could definitely be looking for. Where do you, just sort of widening it out in terms of other players we've been linked with, where do you feel like this week in what's happened in the Premier League with Anderson, with Tonali, with Fernandes, what do you think Aston Villa are going to make of that when it comes to someone like Morgan Rogers? And, is it possible that despite the fact they could very legitimately say, well, if Tonali's going for this and if Fernandes is going for that and Elliot Anderson's going for this, we value Morgan Rogers that. Yeah. Maybe there are other financial considerations for Aston Villa. Perhaps they need to balance the books and that might play a part in whatever happens. But it really does feel like it's probably complicated things a little bit. Arsenal would have expected, I'm sure, for this to be a challenging deal to do given the contractual situation. I think he's a contract till 2031 or something like that. Yeah. So, this isn't a guy you can get cheap because he's got 12 months left on his deal. So they would have known that anyway, but it's probably gone to a different level.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at what PSG have come out with regarding Barcola, I'd be probably expecting similar from Aston Villa in terms of looking at the talent of the player, the age of the player, and big clubs are going to be the ones who are shopping for him. In terms of how, I guess, you go about getting that deal done, it also, I think, really stresses the importance of selling well this summer. When you're looking at that left wing area for Arsenal in particular, you have Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard, who are both actually doing very well at the World Cup. I'd say I was thankful. I wrote something about Trossard went out on Wednesday morning, and I mentioned he had created the most chances out of anyone in the group stages, and thankfully he finally got an assist in the evening. Yeah, and Martinelli showed again he's a big player for big moments. So I think if you're Arsenal, you're kind of thankful they both are showing their best qualities in this time, because you can then say, okay, well, they're doing well. We want this much. I know what might hamper that slightly is the contractual situations. Trossard is a year, I believe. Martinelli is a year with an option. But I do feel like getting as much money for those two, if they do decide to sell one or the other or both, is going to be really important. And I know earlier in the summer, David Ornstein reported they were wanting around 20 million for Jesus. I don't know how realistic that is now.
Not very. I would not
very. But I do think that is part of the, I guess, that's part of the window that we still need to see Berta, strut his stuff, if we want to put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's not much happening. There are things rumbling, of course, in the background, and so much of what might happen is informed by the World Cup and what's been happening at the World Cup. And listen, every single Arsenal player who went to the World Cup qualified for the knockout rounds. A few of them have gone home since, so we might talk a little bit about them. And we had a couple of questions from our Discord, and Count Swagula wants to know, do you think Gyökeres getting a full pre-season this time around will make a noticeable difference? I'm not sure it's going to be a full pre-season, because I think pre-season starts on Monday for the players who aren't at the World Cup and who haven't been involved in on international duty, and someone like Gyökeres will probably get 2-3 weeks off after the tournament before they return. So it's going to be this weird staggered return to action for many of these players, and it looks like quite a busy pre-season as well, with lots of games. Community Shield as well to take into account before it all kicks off again on August 21st. But do you think that might be a benefit to Gyökeres, because what happened last summer where he wasn't training, was doing his own fitness thing? I think he had a VHS, a yoga tape, and he was doing a bit in his apartment in Lisbon before it all happened. But I think it's quite interesting to consider that, and also maybe consider Kai Havertz, because if we accept that Gabriel Jesus is going to leave for whatever amount of money that might be, and I suspect, like you, it's not going to be very much. If we're being selfish Arsenal fans here, our German listeners, our Swedish listeners might have wanted their country to go further in the World Cup, but from our perspective as Arsenal fans, having those two sort of head back home, considering how important they're going to be, because I think you're looking at, you know, the two main strikers for next season, because I don't really expect Arsenal to sign like a striker that's going to come in and challenge either of those two. There might be somebody who comes in to play a bit of backup. I don't quite know what profile of player that would be. But I think for those two to be sort of off and on their holidays now and having a bit of a rest is no bad thing.
Yeah, I think I have to look at it as a pair, because they've gone out at the same time. And not only did Gyökeres have those kind of maybe teething issues that you alluded to, but Havertz got injured on the first day of the season last year. And I think that had a real impact on how much football Gyökeres was playing. It was a lot of, 80, 90-minute games for him, one after the other, without any real respite. And there was no kind of, difference in what he could do. He was quite one-dimensional at the start of the season, whereas I think coming into next season, having him and Havertz both getting these 3 weeks off that they usually get after major tournaments, I think you'll be able to not just get maybe one starting one game and the other starting the other, but you also could use them together a little bit more as well, like we saw at different points last season, which I actually think gets the best out of Gyökeres, because even in the World Cup, you saw him playing alongside Isak. I think he's just able to, take a different type of space on the pitch and have someone around him who can just bounce the ball off of, which is a lot easier to do than, trying to occupy two centre-backs when that's not really your game, even though you're big, that isn't your game, really. So I do think it'll be quite nice for them both to have a similar time off and then a similar, kind of grace period heading into the season. Do you have any sort of thoughts on what Arsenal might do for that,
in inverted commas, third striker? Because it is quite funny. We talk about the futures of Gabriel Martinelli and we talk about the future of Leandro Trossard. Mm-hmm. Those are conversations which have been ongoing for quite a while, right? Both of those players are viewed primarily as players who play on the left-hand side. But we've seen Trossard play as a centre forward for Arsenal, a kind of false nine. Mm-hmm. We haven't really seen Gabriel Martinelli deployed in central areas in the way that some people might like. And I sort of have this feeling about him when he is in those central areas that the more instinctive part of his game comes to the fore, because when you receive the ball out on the left-hand side, you've got a defender in front of you. You might have two defenders in front of you. You got to think about, right, what do I do here? Do I go inside? Do I go outside? It doesn't always work. Defenders are good. Wingers can't beat their man every time. I understand that. But then you look at the goal Martinelli scored for Brazil. Quick touch, bang, into the goal, wins the game for Brazil late on against Japan. It reminded me, not that it was the same kind of goal, but it reminded me a little of the goal he scored against Manchester City, which was his only Premier League goal last season, where there was only one thing he could do in that moment, right? The ball came over from Eze and he could see the goalkeeper come out, and there was only one finish that he could apply, and he applied that finish. He executed it perfectly in both of those goals. Is there a case to be made that maybe one of those players, even if you're thinking about upgrading the left-hand side, could be the de facto third striker as well at times? Or do Arsenal need to sort of say, well, we've got everything we can out of Trossard. He's 31. We should get a few quid in, reinvest that. That's how you sort of keep squads fresh. And Martinelli, if we're going to sell him, maybe now with 2 years left on his deal, we're not going to offer him a new one. Let's get value. He can go somewhere. A good World Cup can do it, and we'll refresh that entire area. But you are sort of losing two left wingers, but you're also losing two potential fill-in forwards, if that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. And if I'm being totally honest, my head goes towards the second option. And the reason for that isn't because I don't want to see either of them play there. It's because I'm looking at the way Mikel Arteta has behaved over the past 6 years, and he's hardly used, as you say, Martinelli as a 9 from the start of a game. And even last year, I was actually quite surprised when looking back. He didn't start Trossard as a 9 once. So even when Gyökeres and Havertz and Gabriel Jesus was out, he started with Mikel Merino because everyone knows, I guess, the qualities he brings to that position now. Yeah. But I still think there were maybe opportunities when that front line was quite light to use Trossard centrally. And it kind of weirded me out in a way that after like so many seasons where he had been used as a false 9 and really effectively, that all of a sudden he was just seen as a left winger. So that's why in my head, I don't know if Arteta would kind of go back to using him that way. But it feels like once Arteta's mind is made up,
sure,
it doesn't change. So yeah, for me, if I'm looking at that area, one person I would actually like to bring up in regards to that position is Ethan Nwaneri, because I don't know if people remember, but there was a press conference, I think it would have been around Christmas in 2024, around New Year. So just before he had his first start against Brentford in the Premier League. And Arteta said he believes that Ethan could develop into a number 9. And it kind of shocked people a little bit. But I remember him saying it, I was like, oh yeah, because when Ethan was in the under 18s during the FA Youth Cup run, I believe, Wilshere actually used him as a 9 quite a bit. And the main reason Arteta then gave was just because of his finishing ability. And I think everyone can see that that is probably Ethan's biggest strength. That and being able to, get a yard on a defender as well. That first couple of yards, he's really good at creating separation. So that's always kind of been in the back of my head, especially with the way that the right wing position has developed since he was playing there. Obviously, Madueke and Dalman getting more minutes there, and also Eze coming in as a number 10 with Ødegaard too. So, but also part of me is saying that because I really don't want Nwaneri to leave on a permanent this summer. And if there's any way for him to be part of this team, I would love it. And I do think that could be a role for him to exploit, if we use that term.
I'm with you on Nwaneri. Like, I recognize that maybe there's a bit more development required, certainly in the mind of Mikel Arteta. I don't want to say he hasn't had a fair chance, but I think we can all see that there is something there. And if there's a way of finding a good loan deal this summer, then I'd be happier with that, to see him go and play a year of Premier League football rather than go to France where it just didn't work out for whatever political and footballing reasons. It just did not work out for him there. Clubs know and managers know, and they have to make decisions, and I get it, and there's always an element of risk, but I'd love to see him play a year in the Premier League while he's still an Arsenal player, where if it goes really well, we go, ooh, you know what? That's fucking great. I also think perhaps there is some need to generate revenue this summer, and I get that if you're a Hale End graduate, then, what was Miles's little thing, pure profit, I think that might be a factor when it comes to how the club are viewing things. I suppose the other thing to say, by the way, is you mentioned it there, is that maybe the de facto third striker is Mikel Merino. And that if the midfield reinforcements are strong enough, then it allows you to use Merino there if you absolutely need him. You might also argue that perhaps with Gyökeres, with Havertz, with Marino, a slightly different style of player might be required up front or might be good up front. But those are questions for Mikel Arteta. Here's a question from Shatner's Bassoon, who says, maybe it's because I've been conditioned by Mikel, but I've been thinking about fullbacks. Does the demand on the position in today's game make it more inevitable that they sustain more injuries than other players? Look at England, for example. And if so, do we need a battery of fullbacks to rotate them through the season like cricket teams use fast bowlers instead of being tied to the choice of first choice and backup? I thought it was fascinating, by the way, that England took Livramento and Reece James and left Trent Alexander-Arnold out of the squad entirely. James and Livramento have had serious injuries. I think if you're going to sort of look at someone like Jed Spence and say, well, he can be the guy who fills in, maybe he's a bit defensively suspect. Well, if you have worries about Trent Alexander-Arnold's defensive work, which I understand, surely the fact that he's absolutely fucking brilliant when he crosses the halfway line gives him the edge over someone like Jed Spence. But that's just my ad hoc analysis of the England squad. But I mean, what do you make of that with regards fullbacks? And there's obviously spotlight on that when it comes to the right back position in particular for Arsenal, with Ben White and Jurrien Timber both dealing with injury issues at this moment in time.
I definitely think it's a valid point, and it's something that I've kind of alluded to in pieces over the years, not just with Ben White and Jurrien Timber, but going back to Takehiro Tomiyasu. And again, I don't want to say it's an Arsenal thing because it happens at a lot of clubs. But when you're sat there in the stadium and you can see the right back or the left back sprinting, let's say, almost up to the final third, and it's not because they're part of an attack, it's because they're pressing. They're pressing, let's say, the opposition left back, because maybe, say, Saka's pressing a right back. So they're sprinting that high up the pitch, but then they also have to sprint back to make recovery tackles, make recovery runs on their own goal line or near the corner flag. I think that is probably the most demanding area on the pitch in modern football, alongside central midfielder, obviously. But I do think it does take a toll when you are putting your body through that much intense running. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you get so many injuries to players who play in that position, because there is just so much that is required of them in such a high intensity game. And I don't know if we get to a point where you almost reverse it back and teams stop pressing so much because of the injury risks. I don't know. It feels like we're probably too far gone at this point and everyone's just going to press forever. I do wonder if there will ever be kind of like a breaking point in general. Again, I'm not trying to make it an Arsenal thing. It's more a football thing in general, because you see it happen across the Premier League. I mean, Tottenham as well had their issues, not just with fullbacks, but with centre-backs under Ange, and how demanding their roles were. I do think sometimes less is more.
Sometimes, but it doesn't seem to happen, because you can even see it this World Cup in terms of how, in inverted commas, smaller teams are playing, that the sort of high energy physical aspect of the game these days is just baked in. You know, there's no getting away from that. And obviously we're waiting here and hopefully hear good news about Timber and White. Timber in particular, who we haven't heard anything about, and there was some sort of vague stuff about a rehab plan that he mentioned when he left the World Cup. A player that we have been mentioned, because there's talk of Kepa Arrizabalaga leaving the club, and I think it was James who reported that the release clause, we signed him for £5 million, and that seemed like a bargain, price for a player of his experience, but it was predicated on the fact that there was a release clause where he could leave for the exact same fee. So he might well go, and he might well go and play first-team football. A player who we've been linked with to come in and replace him as a more experienced number 2 is Leeds' Ilham Meslier, who, is a young goalkeeper who made a breakthrough, and then I don't know if you hit a wall or you make just one too many mistakes, and faith is undermined in you. Where do you stand on the number 2 goalkeeper thing? Like, do you need a Kepa where if something happens to David Raya, you're not absolutely and utterly diminished by a sort of downgrade, for want of a better term? Or is it a case that, I remember when Arsenal won the league in 2003, 2004, it was Jens Lehmann and Graham Stack, and Graham Stack didn't play a single game that season. In the Champions League or the Premier League, you rely on your goalkeeper to stay fit. It is a tricky position to fill. It's one you need to sort of think about almost every summer.
Yeah, I'd be more inclined to go let's say the Kepa Meslier route. Or route. That was really weird. I don't know why I did that.
That's the New York Times coming out of New York.
But yeah, I'd be more secure with that. I think what's really, I guess, the headache comes when Mikel Arteta decides to buy 2 number 1s. Which he's done more than once. I mean, everyone lost their mind when it was David Raya and Aaron Ramsdale, but I think they forget that Aaron Ramsdale did the same thing to Bernd Leno, Leno might have won Player of the Season a couple years beforehand as well, or he was in the running, definitely in the running. So I just hope that when Kepa goes, there is a clear distinction, as there should be, between David Raya, the number 1, and whoever comes in. They know that they're not going to be, used in most games. It'll just be here and there in the Carabao Cup, potentially. And everyone knows their role, basically. I wouldn't want to, risk might not be the right word, but I wouldn't want to just have a body there.
Sure. Does it save a manager a decision to make if and when you get to a cup final where you go, okay, listen, I don't think Kepa's anywhere near as good as David Raya, but I could sort of vaguely get my head around why Mikel Arteta made the decision he did. Even if I didn't agree with it, I can understand why he made that decision. Whereas, in the past, for example, Arsene Wenger played David Seaman in a cup final when he hadn't really played any of the games up to that because, well, he's by far your best goalkeeper. So maybe you just play the best guy. Yeah,
I think if we get to another cup final or 2 next season, actually, let's just keep it the cups because we know who's going to play if it's a Champions League final.
Sure.
I do think Arteta would do the same. I just feel like, especially, I know you mentioned Arsene Wenger there, but when Arteta was a player at Arsenal in the 2014 Cup final, Fabianski played. I think Ospina played in, I'm not sure if it was 2015 or 17.
Ospina took over as number 1 from Szczesny in early 2015 because he got caught smoking or whatever. But Szczesny, he was the number 1 in the Premier League, and then Szczesny played in the final against Aston Villa.
Yeah, so he's kind of been around that situation before. So as you say, even if we don't agree with it, you can understand why he's done that. And I don't think there'd be, a world where he doesn't do that just because, as we say, he's very set in his ways.
Well, we'll see. Maybe that's a bridge that we can cross when we come to it. There's Arsenal involvement today in the World Cup. Our Spanish contingent could play. Zubimendi and Raya yet to feature in the tournament, but Mikel Merino started the last game he could play this evening when they face Austria. Speaking of Spaniards, there was a bit of news today. A former Arsenal player, Santi Cazorla, who's retired from the game at the age of 41. I just thought it might be interesting to talk about him for a couple of minutes because he was such an amazing player, such a brilliant footballer technically, who sort of defied the modern physical demands of the game in a way, because he was small, and the athlete variety of footballer has become more and more prevalent, right? Because, as we just said, the physical demands of the game are such these days that, to give yourself the best possible chance of playing well and achieving things in the game, if you're an athlete, it really helps. But that wasn't Santi Cazorla's greatest strength. He also is a little bit of a throwback to, listen, I don't want to say this about every modern footballer because I'm generalizing and it's not the case, but when footballers were kind of fun, and he was a little bit of a character on top of all of that. It's only 2018 when he left Arsenal. Obviously, he had those injury problems, so we didn't see enough of him in the time that he spent in red and white. But an amazing player and an amazing career, really, when you consider where he started. And
where he ended.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Obviously, getting promotion with Real Oviedo again last season. I feel like he's someone that, when you look back at Arsenal in that era, he obviously was a lot of people's favourite, but he was also very early on the kind of Twitter wave. So one of my memories of him is, so for my first North London derby that I went to was in 2013, and it was the day before Arsenal signed Ozil. So Bale had already left Tottenham, and obviously everyone was singing about that. I was sat in the clock end, and Giroud scored the only goal. And at the time, Cazorla on Twitter would like Arts fans to send pictures from the game, and he would retweet some. So thankfully they were celebrating right in front of me, and I took a picture on my BlackBerry. The quality is absolutely terrible. But I added him and I sent the picture, and that was the first time I had any sort of interaction with a professional footballer.
Sure.
And yeah, I was just like, oh my God. But in terms of what he represents as a footballer is just pure football. And as you say, Andrew, I think the game is really missing players like that in today's age. And when we speak about the physical demands, part of what I was kind of maybe alluding to in terms of when is there going to be a game breaker or something that, just breaks the mold, is also when is there going to be a play like that doesn't just, abide by all the rules, does something a bit off the cuff. And to be fair, one of them is Ryan Cherky, and I don't care if most Arsenal fans hate him now. I still love him because he is such a free spirit. And yeah, I think you had that with Cazorla, left foot, right foot, always a joy to watch. And yeah, you just wish he had a full season to go out on. Because, I mean, his last 2 years at the club were really, really hard for him to go through.
Well, yeah. I mean, the injuries, I think, one of the things that maybe we don't talk enough about, and it's a word that's thrown around a lot about professional football, is mentality, right? There's a really brilliant piece by Sid Lowe, an interview with Santi Cazorla. I'll put it in the show notes so people can go and have a read of it. And it lays bare the injury issues that he had. And it started with a little ankle injury that he picked up for Spain playing for Chile. And then people will remember it was against Ludogorets at the Emirates, where he had to come off at halftime, or maybe he had to come off in the first half. The pain was just too much. He had surgeries. His ankle kept getting infected. It was eating away at his tendon. He had a piece of his arm grafted onto his ankle. I think he had a tattoo with his daughter's name on his arm, and it's now part of that is on his ankle. And doctors were saying to him, yeah, you should just actually concentrate on being able to walk again and maybe have a little walk around the garden with your son. And that's how serious this was. And he came back and he played for Villarreal. He left Arsenal. Arsenal, I think, as they have done in the past, did something that not all clubs will do, which is extend a contract. They gave him a year's contract so that when he had the operation, he had the safety net of that. And I think, that's something really quite special about the way Arsenal operate. They've done it before and they'll do it again, I'm sure. But this was so serious for Santi Cazorla, and then he ended up going back to Villarreal, went to play in Qatar, and then goes to play for Real Oviedo, which is the club he grew up supporting, helped them get promoted to La Liga, which I think extended his career by another year. He couldn't just retire having got them there. But at 40, to be still playing at 41 when in your 30s, doctors are saying you'll be lucky if you can walk. I mean, genuinely, the word amputation was thrown around. So, for all the talk about him being a fun character, and there's all the things that he used to do for Arsenal.com, and the Australian run, which is just so funny. He's a really funny, genuine guy. There is a strength of character and a strength of will there that saw him overcome something which I'm not sure every player would have been able to.
No, and a lot of people, I guess, are pointing out, Cristiano Ronaldo's 41 at this World Cup, blah, 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 blah. But I think when you see someone go through the extent of injuries that Santi did, come through it and still play to 41, it adds something, I guess, much more weighty, I feel. And it is, I think part of it also would have been he would have wanted to make up for the years he would have lost.
Of course, yeah.
I feel. And not just kind of bow out and give up and say, okay, this injury's got the better of me. Let's call it a day. And I think for him to prove to himself more than anyone, because even though we all love him, our opinions don't matter as much to him as his own opinion. So I think for him to prove to himself at such an age, and again get back to La Liga and do what he's done is exceptional. And yeah, hopefully, I know he's been at the Emirates loads of times since leaving Arsenal, but hopefully he gets to come back again and everyone can give him that warm welcome, because he didn't. I know, as I said, he's been there again, but he didn't get a proper goodbye. Yeah,
he didn't get a chance to say goodbye properly. And I know there's always been lots of talk about him coming back to Mikel Arteta's coaching staff. And Arteta sort of always played that with a bit of a straight bat, but they have a good relationship from the time he arrived. And Arteta, I think, took him under his wing, with regards settling into London and the language and all those kinds of things. So they have a great relationship. It all depends what Santi Cazorla wants to do. He might want to take a year off and just relax, because he has worked very, very hard at his career. But, whatever happens, we wish him the very best with his retirement and whatever comes next, wherever that might be. Right, we better leave it there. Art, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you very much indeed to Art, and you can find him writing about Arsenal very well as always in The Athletic. The last bit, I think it's the last bit of Arsenal round of 32 World Cup action is tonight, when Spain take on Austria. So Raya, Zubimendi and Marino, the players involved there. I'm going through the rest of the round of 32 fixtures. We've got some ex-Arsenal with Granit Xhaka. Portugal, Croatia, nothing there. Australia, Egypt, nothing there. Argentina, Cape Verde, nothing there. Although we're all blue sharks in this part of the world at this moment in time. And then it's Colombia, Ghana, and then we're into round of 16 games. So let's see what the Spanish contingent do in their game against Austria this evening. We'll talk about that on the blog over the next few days as well. And you can join myself and James for an Arsecast Extra on Monday, as always. For now, though, thank you so much as always for being here, and thank you for listening, downloading, subscribing and supporting everything that we do on Arseblog. We really do appreciate it. Hope your summer's going all right wherever you are in the world. For now, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one.